In the heart of Lagos, where the bustling streets never sleeps and love stories were often whispered through the evening breeze, Kunle and Ifoma were known as the perfect couple. Their love had blossomed in the crowded corridors of their high school, where they had vowed to build a future together. Ifoma, a strong-willed and intelligent woman, was the daughter of a prosperous businessman, while Kunle was a young man with big dreams but little means. They faced struggles together, working tirelessly to build a name for themselves. When Ifoma's father passed away, leaving her a vast inheritance, she did not hesitate to invest in their shared dreams. Her financial support, nearly 80% of their empire, was the foundation on which they built their fortune. Kunle became a prominent figure in business, and together they rose from humble beginnings to a life of wealth and prestige. But while money flourished, time was not as generous. The couple waited anxiously for a child, their prayers stretching across the years. It seemed that fate had granted them everything except an heir. After years of waiting, Ifoma's prayers were finally answered. She was pregnant, and with twin boys. The entire community rejoiced. But unknown to many, something had changed in Kunle. The man who once adored his wife began to drift away. At first, it was the late nights at work, then unexplained absences, and then the rumors, whispers of another woman. Ifoma's heart shattered as she learned that Kunle had taken a mistress, a young woman with no history of sacrifice or struggle. Ifoma's condition deteriorated as the emotional weight of betrayal crushed her spirit. Yet, she held on for the sake of her unborn sons, hoping that Kunle would see reason. But when she discovered that he had gone beyond infidelity and married the woman, it was as if a knife had been driven into her heart. Her strength waned, her once radiant smile disappeared, and her body, overwhelmed by grief and stress, could no longer bear the burden. The day the twins were born, she passed. Ifoma's weak body succumbed to the pain, leaving behind two newborn boys and a widowed husband who barely showed remorse. While the village mourned, Kunle, now fully consumed by his new wife, barely acknowledged the tragedy. But the heavens had seen. And though Ifoma's lips had closed forever, her spirit lived on through the twins, Toby and Tunde. Kunle did not yet know it, but his new life of comfort and indulgence was about to become a nightmare. At first, it was small things, the strange cries of the twins in the dead of the night, the way they seemed to stare at Kunle with knowing eyes, as if they had lived 1,000 years. As they grew, their presence in his life became unbearable. They refused to be held by him, screamed at the touch of his new wife, and when they could walk, they avoided him as though he carried a curse. The mansion that had once been a place of joy soon became a house of torment. Mirrors shattered whenever Kunle passed by. The air grew thick with an unseen face that unsettled his every step. His new wife could barely sleep, often waking up screaming about shadows that whispered Ifoma's name. The village elders murmured, warning him that the spirits of the wrong do not sleep in peace. But Kunle, stubborn and proud, dismissed their words. He had built his empire. No ghost, no child could undo him. The twins' strange behavior only intensified. Toby and Tunde spoke to unseen forces, whispering in corners where shadows flickered unnaturally. When they laughed, the walls seemed to shake. When they cried, the air became unbearably cold. Kunle's businesses began to fail. Contracts that were once easily secured crumbled overnight. Trusted partners withdrew, whispering superstitions about men who wronged their wives. His once loyal friends distanced themselves, afraid of the ill luck that clung to him like an invisible shroud. At home, his new wife fell ill, growing weaker by the day. Her nights plagued with visions of Ifoma standing at the edge of her bed, watching. The twins, however, remained untouched by whatever curse had descended upon the house. They thrived, growing stronger, their eyes always watching, always knowing. Kunle could not bear it any longer. Desperate, Kunle sought spiritual help, going from one prophet to another, one herbalist to another. Each time, the answer was the same. You wronged the woman who built you. Her spirit will not rest until justice is served. They instructed him to make amends, to honor Ifeoma, to restore what he had taken. But Kunle, ever prideful, refused. He believed he could buy his way out, bribe the spirit into silence. But the twins knew. They watched, they waited. And on the 14th anniversary of their mother's death, they spoke. That night, the air was thick with tension. The twins, now 14 years old, stood before their father. Their voices were no longer childish, but eerily unified. "She is waiting." The walls trembled. The lights flickered. A deep guttural wail filled the mansion, shaking the very foundations. Kunle fell to his knees, his screams merging with the howling wind. His new wife, now barely clinging to life, collapsed, her body too weak to bear the weight of her sins. The ground beneath them cracked, as though the earth itself had grown weary of harboring injustice. And as the night consumed the mansion, Kunle's cries were lost to the darkness. But the twins were not done. Kunle's wealth, his properties, his businesses, all began to slip through his fingers. The partners who had once feared him now turned their backs as whispers of a man caused by his own children spread through the city. His new wife, now fully bedridden, muttered incoherent words. Haunted by unseen shadows, the mansion that had once stood as a symbol of power became a relic of ruin. The twins, still young but wise beyond their years, carried an airy presence, their every movement deliberate, their every gaze piercing. Kunle, once a proud man, found himself kneeling before them, tears streaming down his face. "What do you want?" he pleaded. Toby and Tunde exchanged a look. Then, in voices that carried the weight of their mother's pain, they whispered, "Justice." But the twins were not done. Kunle's desperation knew no bounds. He traveled to the farthest corners of the country, seeking redemption in ancient shrines, consulting diviners and making sacrifices to gods who refused to listen. The spirit of vengeance had settled in his home, and nothing he did could drive them away. At night, shadows moved in his peripheral vision. The wails of his first wife echoed through the cold, empty halls, and his new wife, now lost in madness, clawed at the walls as if trying to escape an unseen torment. One evening, as Kunle sat alone in what was once his grand estate, Toby and Tunde appeared before him. They no longer looked like children. They had grown into something else, beings that straddled the line between the living and the dead. "You will feel what she felt," Toby said. "You will live with the same agony she bore," Tunde added. Kunle shuddered. The room grew unbearably cold as a thick unnatural fog seeped through the doors and windows. Suddenly, a piercing pain shot through his chest. He gasped, clutching at his heart as if Ifeoma's voice filled the air around him. "You built your kingdom on betrayal," the voice whispered. "Now you will watch it crumble." Kunle collapsed onto the ground, his body racked with convulsions. His new wife let out one final scream before she fell beside him. The next morning, the villagers found Kunle's once magnificent home in ruins. The once mighty man was discovered coiled up in a corner, his hair now white, his eyes vacant, his mind lost. The new wife lay cold beside him, her face frozen in an expression of terror. As for Toby and Tunde, they walked away from the wreckage without a word, their work complete. They had never harmed their father physically, but they had ensured that he paid the ultimate price, losing everything he had stolen from their mother. They did not look back as they left the village, stepping into the world beyond with the quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. Betrayal and greed lead to destruction. No wealth gained at the cost of another person's suffering will last, and the past always comes back to seek its due.